Hi, my name is Casey from Retroactive Arcade, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about arcade push buttons, what they are, what types there are, and basically how they work. They're very simple. Once you see how it all goes together, or how it all works, then you can pretty much go hard for everything that there is that's available out there. I don't have every push button that's out there available here, but they all work the same way. Basically, it's a momentary push. So you push down, it makes the connection. So it's basically open, and then you hit it to close it, and then it makes the connection and goes to your board. Just like, I guess, in a sense, like a keyboard, which will be through your encoders for MAME, and for JAMA, it just makes that connection on the board for you to set you up to show the actual action of the button. The buttons that you've played with in the past on any arcade machine that you could possibly remember is going to be this American style push button. So this is on the old school Street Fighters, Mortal Kombat's, all those big fun kind of good old games. Mash them, smash them, the whole meal deal. The only difference with these ones is that these ones have the new micro switch on them. Before they used to have a gold leaf, but the button itself had the same feel and everything else. It wasn't the exact same design because of the way the thing worked, but all the newer buttons, there's no real gold leaf being remade now. If there is, there's really small batches and somebody getting into some very niche market stuff. They've done some hybrids and stuff that I'll show you today that are equivalent to that same feel and reaction. So this one here specifically is a Suzo Happ, and you can identify it here in the bottom where it says Suzo Happ right on the actual mold of the button itself. IL makes the same button, and it says IL or Industrious Lorenzo on it. Basically, they are the identical same button. So they're made out of the same molds, that type of thing. IL has actually made some of these buttons for Suzo Happ in the past, and then Suzo Happ just gets them all sent over in pieces and puts them all together and assembles them in the United States. So IL is out of Barcelona in Spain. I've actually been to the factory to check them out, and they mass produce this stuff like crazy. So and they do an amazing job. Their stuff is top notch. Unfortunately, we don't carry it. It's just so because you're going to look at our stuff and say, why don't you have it? They just ask for a massive amount of upfront cost to purchase. They're basically, you have to buy thousands at a time kind of a thing. Moving on from this American style button, you also have the ones that are printed like so, and then we get into convex buttons for illuminated buttons. There are convex buttons in this American style. We don't carry them. They're for a very specific use or for a very specific person that wants that feel. We just don't find that this has that much of appeal for us. But when you come into illuminated buttons, no matter what you do, they are convex. So with that being said, it gives you that whole different feel. Illuminated buttons give you a whole different feel. There are a bunch of different kinds, and I will go over those separately in this video closer to the end. And then we get into the specialty buttons of Sanwa, Seimitsu, that type of a thing. They are technically all kind of the same. So it's just got a more delicate, more refined connection on the end here. What happens on these ones is that the American style push button has a micro switch in it. The Chinese, Japanese versions of Sanwa and Seimitsu, basically what they have is a PCB inside. So it's less connections, less analog going through it. I guess in a sense you could call it a digital push button. They only come in a couple different styles. They don't have, I guess they do have illuminated push buttons if you really want to look at them, but they're very specific to a one use and a one size. They come with wires already adapted to them and everything else. Mostly they just come in this translucent type of a button. So if you want to light it up, you kind of have to light up your cabinet from underneath and it'll kind of glow through. I've done that in the past. It's just a lot of work for a little bit of effect. So it's not necessarily worth it in my opinion. Then we come into the fusion buttons that we carry. So we have the American style and we also have the LED style. So as you can see with those as well, one is concave, one is convex. All right, so with these fusion buttons that I'm just mentioning here, the difference between them, they're basically, we call them a fusion because they're a hybrid. So everybody gives them all these different names. It's basically a crown button. It's made from crown. It's basically a Chinese type of new brand that they've come out with. It's actually a high quality brand. It's very good. We swear by it. It's actually really, we haven't had any problems with it whatsoever. The LEDs shine super bright, and the life cycle on them is amazing. So, and the response rate for them, and so on and so forth. So that's the difference between what I was just talking about before with the gold leaf, old school, the old metal brass tongs or whatever that would touch each other. That would give you that soft, quiet feel and an immediate response. These ones here, even though it's the new way that they've been doing it for, past couple decades, basically this one here is fairly analog in a sense where you've got a button and a plunger. Once you press it, then it hits a switch on top of your micro switch, which here would be it. So it clicks that little switch, and then it goes through here and then makes its connection. So basically, when you go into a hybrid or a Seimitsu Sanwa type button, with it being digital, there's only one press, so you don't have other points of possible failure or analog connection where it gives you a millisecond delay, that type of a thing. So they feel a little more responsive. In the end, the difference between them is minimal or negligible. If you are a regular Street Fighter kind of smash them, beat them up kind of a player, you're going to probably go with this American style button. If you are making your own fight stick, that type of a thing, and you're playing on the new PlayStation 5 kind of thing, playing the new Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat's, whatever, and you have a specific controller made for that, that's where you're going to get into these Sanwa, Seimitsu type buttons where they're immediate response. You can get silencers and all that fun stuff for them. It doesn't take very much to press for pressure to press that plunger to hit that, to make that actually go. And the difference is amazing for that situation. But for, say, a game like Pac-Man, old school, like original Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, that type of a thing, you are not going to notice the difference because the game can't respond as fast as the button can be pressed. So yeah, it's not going to make that much of a difference. The only thing that you would look at for that is maybe your joystick and response times and stuff. So you're going to look at that for special moves and that type of thing, which will be we'll go over all that in a different video. Back to these fusion buttons yet again. What they are is a fusion/hybrid between the two. So it has a PCB on the inside of this button, so it gives you that fast response rate, but it also gives you one less point of contact for your analog press and whatever, so that you have less to go wrong with it and it lasts a lot longer. There is a spring and stuff in it, but it's all embedded inside the PCB in here instead of having an actual spring, which these ones have. I will take these apart in this video to show you how to do all that stuff, or to show you what's inside. And yeah, that's pretty much about it for that one. I'll get to that in a minute. Other stuff for your buttons and things, you're going to want to look at plugs to fit the different size holes for your cabinet, just in case you want to expand it for later, and or you buy a kit and it has too many holes, or you cut the wrong hole, then you can kind of save that for later or whatever, fix it somehow, that type of a thing. Usually people only use this one if they're planning on expanding later and haven't done anything with that spot, but they wanted to drill it while they were building it, and or if you're modifying actually like an old cabinet and you need to cover up some holes on the console top without creating and building a new console top, you just drill the holes you want and then plug up the ones you don't use. Micro switches that I was talking about prior, there's lots of different micro switches. There's lots of different values to those micro switches and reasons behind them. They basically come in weights. I'm not going to tell you all the weights that there are available for them because there are too many. But basically what the weight means on it is it's the amount of pressure to click the actual button itself to make your contact/connection. So in the end, you are like these ones here, these are really generic. So these are just some sort of Chinese straight up basic one that takes a lot of pressure to press. So you know, you imagine it doesn't sound like much, so it depends on how picky you are. But some people, you know, you're playing the game for a really long time. You're smashing up. Your fingers and your wrists and stuff are going to get sore over time. This one here is, as you saw in this one has 3 prongs. This one has 2 prongs. You're going to get different kinds. This one here is also just a generic basic one. This one actually has a harder press to it than the other one. So you're going to get different weights that way. Then we get into like cherry micro switches. You're getting into zippy micro switches. Now when it comes to switches from China, zippy's actually not that bad at all. They're pretty good. It just depends on the batch. I've found that once in a while what'll happen is they use just sometimes generic metal, so by the time it gets to you, you can actually see some corrosion on it already just from the moisture in the air, or if it came by boat and it was like, you know, on the sea, and then it gets moist and then it starts to corrode and whatever. Where you see on these cherry micro switches, what happens is you got, you know, a little bit of a more of a brass kind of contact on it, and then you have your galvanized or stainless kind of metal for your button for your ground there. So there is quality differences in that. If you just buy something that's straight from China, you're going to get different batches no matter what. We've been dealing with them for years. We order the same thing every time. They send us the same thing, but it's not. It's just generic in a sense, right? It's all with their like JAMA harnesses and all that stuff too. It's like all of a sudden it's different colors per batch. We open a bag of 10 or 20 and then you open another bag of 10 or 20 and they're all different colors. Those things don't really matter, but it's still frustrating because you want to get what you want to get and have some consistency. So yeah, there's a lot of different ones. They're called like micrograms on them, so you can find your gram weight and all that stuff. You'll have to look into that and delve in further if you're getting really picky about your pressures and all that stuff. But when you buy IL and or Suzo Happ buttons, joysticks, you're pretty much going to be guaranteed that you're going to be getting cherries on those. Anything from China, like zippy joysticks, that type of thing, you're going to get your zippy type micro switches and stuff. This one will be, this weird long thing here is just for the joystick to touch when you use the actuator on it. So it just shows you different types of micro switches that we have. And this one specifically is for a coin door. These ones here are going to be harder to find in different like weights and grams and stuff because they don't really matter. It's just a one click. Basically the coin comes through, drops it, the weight of that just switches it and good to go. We will show you how to wire up all these different micro switches as we go along in different videos. What I will say on these micro switches, because you're probably asking why do some have 3, why do some have 2, there's only 2 wires to each button, so on and so forth. Basically what you have is you have your ground, right? And then you have your normally open, and then you have your normally closed. So basically what happens is you are only technically going to use the 2 that are showing on these ones here, right? So this one here, the 2, that's all you need. So you go ground and to your normally open. So when you click your button, it closes the feed and you're good to go and you get your action. This one here is basically, if you wired to that, it would be equivalent to holding your button down and just going from there. There are applications where you do need to do that, especially in JAMA, where you are double wiring single buttons, or like you will have 2 or 3 buttons doing the same action. You need to wire it in such a way that you need to have one open, one closed, and so on. So you go from there. Next, I'm going to talk to you about LED buttons and how they go together. All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the LED buttons and how they're wired. First, I will, if you haven't noticed, because I haven't really shown you, everything that you're seeing here is a 187 connector. So what that means is it's the size of the actual connector that you're going to be putting to it. There is no need to solder them anymore. They're quick connect, quick release, that type of a thing. So it just makes your life so much easier when you do that. These buttons come in different sizes. So basically you have your 187 is your standard size for any American style push button with your micro switch. Most micro switches are going to come at 187. The only one that I've found that really kind of sometimes gets a little wonky is IL. Sometimes they'll send you like joysticks or buttons with like 0.250, which is the largest one. That's the one that's on this coin door. It's also the one that's on our LED buttons, and the reason for that is because the LED harness has the 0.250 connector on it, which I'll go over as well. And then you have your hybrid Sanwa and your fusion and that type of a thing. Any of these buttons usually are going to have the 110 connector, which is a bit of a smaller connector on it. If you use a 187 connector on a 110 pin, that's okay. You probably wouldn't be able to put a 110 connector on a 187 pin or larger. It just wouldn't happen. So, you know, it doesn't have to be the exact size for it to work, as long as it'll fit on there. If they have the insulators on the actual connectors, then obviously they're not going to touch and you're not going to have an issue. So if it is a little bit wider, a little bit bigger, just put it on the outside of the pin, especially when it comes to somebody who's modified an old machine, or, you know, anything that's been pre-wired, because you're going to be kind of possibly stuck with the 0.187. Which doesn't mean you have to buy a 110 connector. It's just nice, and the connection or the harnesses themselves, they're not that expensive. They're like $3 to $5. It's not a big deal. So what I'm going to show you is the LED buttons. So these come in 12 volt and 5 volt. 5 volt are really hard to come by, and people don't usually order them too much. Those ones are for like Raspberry Pi, that type of thing, when you're running it via USB, because then it's going to give you that 5 volt. Your arcade power supply, switching power supply, or whatever's in your machine usually doesn't run 5 volt. You'd have to buy an adapter, and they're really expensive to do that unless you're running it off of USB. So I highly recommend going with 12. You're also going to get the brightness and everything else that you want out of that, versus a 5 volt. It'll be just a little bit more dim. Just some of the situations that you are going to be running it in, you may have to run it at 5 volt. Yeah, so these ones here, they come in many different pieces. They work great, but with these pieces, the way these ones are, they come with an individual lamp here that's popped in. So it's like you've got, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's a ring that comes with this as well. So there's like 5 different pieces with it. That's all fine and dandy. They're just a little bit clunky when you put everything together. They're a little bit big, but they are bright, they're great, they serve their purpose, and they come in a couple different models. With that being said, those models are going to be like this one here with the black center. That's kind of a newer thing that they've done in the past few years. They come with the chrome, and they come with just the basic. I'm not a huge fan of these. Once we went into the Fusion, I haven't looked back. I haven't gone that way. Basically, it's just a price point thing. But what I found with these ones, and the downside for them, is that little lamp that's inside there, they dim or die at different times. So, like if you have a control panel and say they're all green like these ones, and you've got 12 buttons plus all your other ones, they're all green. Within, say, even a month, some of them are going to start being dimmer than others, and so on and so forth, and then they'll burn out at different times and really weird stuff. So you're not going to get an even glow or flow from your console. And then if you're really picky, like I am sometimes, depending on what it is, that kind of stuff just really bugs me. It irks me. You spent all that money and time and effort, and then it just kind of gets, and then you got to buy more lamps and that type of a thing. Where what we found is with these Fusion buttons, they burn not only, or they shine a lot brighter, for one, and they're way more consistent. They don't, when they start to dim, they probably die within a couple days if you turn it on all the time and that type of a thing. The only time that usually happens is if you've owned it for a really long time, or you've been playing it for a really long time, or there's a defect obviously from the manufacturer. The downside with that, unfortunately, is you can't just replace the lamp. You have to replace the whole entire button. So if it costs $2, $3 for a button, then that's your price versus your 50 to 75 cents for a lamp to go into one of these buttons. But the longevity on these ones is probably 100 times better. Yeah, once we left, I never looked back. All good, happy days. Now, I'm going to show you what I mean by power and all the other fun stuff. Different options. Okay, so these are LED harnesses. What do we got here? All right, so the LED harnesses come in a couple different versions. So when I was talking about size-wise, when you're going with these older or these kind of more generic LEDs, you can see on the bottom here what happens is it has a 0.250 connector. That's where it's a larger one. This is where you want to, when you're buying your LED harness, you really want to pay attention to the button you're getting and read the specs on each one. This one here is kind of the video itself and is kind of a quick reminder. But yeah, so you want, if you buy this kind of generic-ish type LED button that's 12 volt, you're going to want to buy the 0.250 harness on it. Yellow always means 12 volt. You can use these harnesses for 5 volt, but that's why they're color coded with 12 or with yellow and black, because it's supposed to be a 12 volt harness. It will run 5 if you want to do it that way. We do sell 5 volt harnesses too, but they technically don't make that much of a difference. With that, you also get your 110 harness, and it comes in 2 different ways. And with that 0.250 harness that I just showed you, you can map it the same way with this. I'm just trying to get rid of all the stuff on the table here. So the 110 harness comes with your regular Molex connector for your computer power supply plug-in, right? That's your option for that one. Or you can get a barrel connector if you buy a 12 volt adapter. Now this adapter, we don't sell them, I don't think, for the 5 volt. They're just really hard to find, but you can get them on Amazon. They're kind of expensive, and then you can basically set your power at 5 volt in doing that. With that, if you don't want to use either one of those, then you can go to a different type of barrel connector here where you can power it with that power supply that I just showed you and cut this line off. It kind of defeats the purpose. I would go with the other barrel connector one instead of buying these individually and then cutting them and do whatever. If you already have something like this, or you want to wire your own 12 volt from somewhere to that, this adapter is perfect for that. Yeah, other than that, it comes down to the power on these ones here, as well as all the ground on all these buttons. Micro switch doesn't matter which one it is. You are going to have a daisy chain on any harness for your ground. It includes JAMA, everything. So what you want to do is you just go from one button, straight across, and you just loop them and daisy chain them across to give them all the same ground. And then when your action button wire goes to it, it goes to your specific button that you're mapping to either your JAMA harness or your encoder. Last but not least, how do you get those buttons on there? These nuts are ugly and gross and that kind of a thing, and they're kind of big and nasty. You use a push button nut wrench, or yeah, it's pretty much what you want to call it. Anyway, it comes with 2 different sizes on the nut wrench. It works for your LEDs as well as your regular American style push buttons, and it's long enough to fit pretty much any type of a button. Obviously, you don't want your micro switch on it while you're trying to tighten it up. If you are feeling a little, I don't want to buy a push button nut wrench, you can use needle nose pliers to do it, but I can guarantee you that one of 2 things are going to happen. You're going to scratch the heck out of the bottom of your console and or your nut. So I would strongly suggest not doing this. And when you do tighten them, last but not least, don't tighten them too much. No more than about 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn after it gets tight. What'll happen is you'll actually squeeze the internal or the external part of this button onto the actual plunger of your button, which I said I would show you, and that's inside like so. So you've got nothing in there whatsoever. Your plunger is with your spring, and if you squeeze those together a little bit, then you're going to get a squeaky button, if not a sticky button. And then what happens on these ones is that they that little plunger goes down, this sits in its cradle properly, probably can't see it too well, but it'll sit in its cradle properly, and then you can click that little button. And the weight of that spring and all that stuff makes the difference on that push as well as your micro switch. This is the fusion button. So this is also what the Sanwa and Seimitsu buttons look like on the inside. They're a little bit different, but they're basically the same. So it's the PCB is embedded inside. It's all one piece. The button is just enclosed in there. They make that button and it snaps in from the bottom. So they just snap it in and go. The actual PCB that you'll see in any of these buttons is going to be the LED one, because the PCB just powers that LED. These ones are pretty straightforward too, but they also don't like being tightened too much because you get that oblong shape and squeaky or sticky button. Yeah, pretty much that's the end of that for these bad boys. So if you have any questions, concerns, anything that I missed, anything that you'd like to have us expand on that I haven't done in another video, because I'll probably be talking about these things a little bit more, and you'll have a little bit of repetitive stuff, but I just want to make sure that I do a catch-all for everybody on any video. So if you missed one, at least you get some info and intel on this kind of stuff here and there. So yeah, feel free to contact us. Other than that, hopefully we'll see you on the next video.